This is a special episode of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined for this episode by Rebecca Dow. She is a candidate for governor in the Republican primary, and she is also an elected state representative. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and let's first get a little background on you before we dive into all the controversies and questions. But you are an elected member of the legislature. How long have you been there for? And what made you run in the first place for the legislature, and now decide to run for governor?
Yeah, well, I'm in my third term in the House of Representatives. I'm the Republican caucus chair in the House. And what made me get involved was I moved back. I grew up in Truth or Consequences, and at the age of 26, I moved back to fill community gaps with faith-based organizations. So gathering the community and creating jobs in the community to ensure that families could move out of government dependency into self-sufficiency. So childcare, over a 20-year period, childcare, a K-12 accredited Christian school, GED and credit recovery for dropouts and adult non-traditional learners, behavioral health clinic, transitional housing, just things like this, out-of-school time programming. And when my predecessor stepped down, I saw the need to run for House in order to bring what I thought would be a voice of common sense to Santa Fe. And so, my district is 34% Republican. I just won my third term by 57 points with a Libertarian, and every attack you could possibly imagine. I mean, the Sunday before the election on Tuesday, there was a newspaper distributed across my community that said, tax evasion, coercion, fraud, blackmail, child predator. And if you vote for me, I'd be in jail. But my community, I represent my community. I represent my district. I fight hard in Santa Fe. And, I won by my largest margin. So MLG must be a one-term governor. And when I looked at the other candidates, I was the fifth to announce, and I knew there was others that would announce after me. I know how hard I work, and I know that I win when the odds are against me, and I decided to get in the race because this is a monumental election and such a unique time in our nation's 245-year history. And so I just, it's critically important to me as a mother, as a community leader, as an elected official, that we get this right.
And just for the record, Election day for primaries in New Mexico is June 7th. However, as we record this on Tuesday, May 3rd, we are 1 week from early voting kicking off at county clerk's offices around the state of New Mexico. So, folks, this is indeed a very important election, and I encourage everyone to get out and vote. This is, of course, for the Republican nomination to essentially compete against Michelle Lujan Grisham for governor of New Mexico.
And this is the first year New Mexico has semi-open primaries, which means independents decline to stay. Anybody who's not a major party from May 10th through the close of Election Day can walk in and change their voter registration and cast their vote for Rebecca Dow for governor.
Yeah, that is very true. And worth noting. All right, so you are an elected member of the legislature. That means you have a track record and votes. Before we get to some of the things that may make that challenging, talk about some of the accomplishments or some of the things you're most proud of. Noting, of course, as we do this, that you have been a member of the minority caucus, so you can't just ram through any bill that you want when you're in Santa Fe.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely difficult, and I'm ranked as in the 86th percentile of effectiveness of legislators, especially when it comes to bills around tax, business, education, entrepreneurship issues. And so that's pretty big accomplishment. There are more Democrat chairs and people in Democrat leadership than that. So I shouldn't have that rating. But I am a really hard worker. And so I've been able to get things done for the veterans in our state, been able to work on I've been the co-sponsor on the bill to eliminate the tax on Social Security. So this year that happened. It's an election year. But some of the best bills that happened this year and the best reforms were bills that I've been carrying and championing. Instating the meat inspection, getting increased funding for land and vegetation.
Talk about that more in detail, because that one has become a bigger issue on the national front. Biden administration saying, well, there's 4 meat packers, blah, blah, blah. Talk about how that works in reality.
So over 90% of the beef that's grown in New Mexico, or meat, is processed out of state and never consumed by New Mexicans. These four, as food security becomes an increasingly important issue, and as consumers are more interested in where their food comes from, there's an opportunity for our ranchers to grow food and for it to be consumed by New Mexicans. That required us to have more inspectors. We don't have very many inspectors, so we needed to reinstate a New Mexico beef inspection so that we can grow beef and consume beef in New Mexico and not be beholden and dependent upon those four packers. And, we did that along with expanding things around what they call the cottage industry. That's just so strict in New Mexico. You have to have a fully commercial kitchen to sell granola at the farmer's market. We finally got that done. And so these are things about food security. These are things about quality, safety, and cost. And that is where my focus has been as a legislator, improving the quality of life for families who call New Mexico home. And, you talk about having a record. That record, it's pretty substantial. People can go to nmlegis.gov and look at my accomplishments, and they are many, the bills that we've gotten passed. This legislative session, I'm the governor's opponent. And I'm outnumbered 2-1. And I passed 2 bills this session that the governor signed. One was on reciprocity. So people who move out of state into New Mexico, their license is now good for 1 year. Instead, we didn't recognize their licensure and their experience from other states. They had to go and earn a New Mexico license. So it's a compromise bill. It's not the way I wanted it, but they're going to give people the benefit of the doubt for the first year, and they have to go jump through all those bureaucratic hoops that I want to reduce and eliminate if we can, in order to work from day one and be able to keep their license past that trial period, the assumption period. And the other bill was just getting more COVID release out to businesses that have been impacted from COVID. That aid was sunsetting, and we renewed that. So that, as well as getting items into the budget, like the implementation of the in-state meat inspection. This is just this 30-day session. The exemption on Social Security tax and the elimination of some taxes on military veteran retirement.
And really quickly, for the beef thing or the meat thing, that is for meat produced here in New Mexico and consumed here in New Mexico.
Correct.
So
correct.
It's different from the FDA. That's a whole different process.
It is. It will meet that FDA, and that
meets the standard.
So this was paired with a supply chain effort.
Okay.
So ranchers, if they know that they have a buyer, they can sell in New Mexico. Otherwise, you go to one of these big packers and who knows where it ends up. So we have to coordinate the sale of the beef as they're ready to be harvested. And so it's twofold. It's a supply chain issue, and it's the in-state meat inspection, the ability to process as meat's ready to be harvested in real time.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as a legislator, you've had to take some votes on issues that are, sometimes not as popular. And one of the things that I think that has generated some controversy is the Black Education Act, which passed, I don't think there was a 30-day, I think it was the 60-day.
Yeah.
It has been discussed that this is critical race theory adjacent. And this is, of course, the a very controversial concept. So why don't you talk about your view of the Black Education Act and how you think it does or does not influence critical race theory?
Well, first, let me back up a step, because you said I want the viewers to understand what it's like to be a legislator outnumbered 2-1 in the House and the Senate. You make amendments, they die. You get generally on the floor. There are exceptions because some bills are debated a full 3 hours. But in general, we get 2 options, a yes vote or a no vote. And we have to make that decision in minutes. And in the last 2 years during COVID, with the state being shut down, we've heard little back from industry. And, you're talking about the Black Education Act. No one from school board members to parent associations to administrators to superintendents. There was no objection. No one alerted us to any language or anything that we should be concerned about. So we're just looking at as responding to the Ozzie Martinez lawsuit. And but anyways, in addition to that, during COVID, I'd say in the first session, very few bills even had an analysis for us to read. Right. So we're literally on the floor voting in without knowledge, and we get a yes or a no vote. I remember my very first vote in my health committee my freshman year. It was a step therapy bill on some sort of limitation in liability. It was complicated. I had no idea what it was about, and I passed. Or I said, I abstain. And they said, you can't abstain, Representative Dow. You can pass. My first session in my first committee, first vote in the first committee. And then they came back to me and called my name again. I said, oh, no, I'm abstaining. They're like, no, you can only pass. You must vote yes or no. And so I'm like, yes, I mean, I have so many votes like that. And then it was actually a Democrat lobbyist who came to me and said, you're asking all the right questions and you're trying to make an informed vote in minutes. Why don't you start voting no until they convince you to vote yes? So I'm like, okay, that's great. Cause I mean, you're drinking from a fire hose when you go up there. I'm just a early childhood educator from Truth or Consequences that stepped in to be a voice for my district. And my district has embraced me, celebrates the work that I've done, and sends me back by a larger margin every time. That's why the Democrats redistrict me out of my seat. But on the Black Education Act, what we're presented with is the settlement from the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit and a bill that has an argument that children, particularly low-income, at-risk children who are minorities in New Mexico, are performing, and I believe with African American, at 17 points below their peers. And the gist of the bill and the analysis of the bill looks different in application, but that was when there is a child who's being targeted or being left behind and they're being bullied or whatever, they would be giving tutoring and homework help, and that there would be a discussion about anti-racism. And so in my world and the work that I do as an educator, that looks like an anti-bullying policy. It looks like the statements you see if your children are part of the school lunch program, Liberty and Justice for All, that you will not discriminate, non-discrimination. And so now in this woke world and this runaway government, which is a runaway in every single agency, I can't believe what's happening. The unelected bureaucrats are filling in the blanks and pushing out all this critical race theory that I absolutely oppose. And by the way, no Republican voted against this bill. So now the implication is every Republican in New Mexico is for critical race theory. That is a lie. I mean, I am being called out. I'm getting hit every day because I'm standing up against the woke culture and trying to bring a voice of reason and letting parents be in charge of their children's worldview, not the government. And so to have someone manipulate or misrepresent who I am or what I believe, as a person who founded a K-12 Christian school, a faith-based early childhood program, community homeschool co-op in my district, so that parents are in charge of their children's education, not bureaucrats, it's a misrepresentation of who I am or what I believe.
And that is HB 43 as passed in the 2021 session. So just if folks want to go back and look for that. Now, in the last session, there was a bill, and I want to talk about specifically the rebates issue, but also more broadly a tax reform as you see it in the state of New Mexico. But with all the oil and gas money, and the governor's up for election, so she is definitely hoping to gain some votes by cutting checks to New Mexicans or potentially non-New Mexicans who are not registered to pay taxes. So you were again faced with this vote. Talk about your reasoning on that vote and just where things need to go in terms of tax reform and the discussion with this oil surplus.
So that one was a no vote for me. And, early on when COVID started.
So you voted no on the rebates.
I voted no on $20 million going to non-taxpayers and non-citizens.
Right. But ultimately
and
the final bill was...
the redistribution of wealth through what was considered a rebate. And it to me, so early on in COVID, whenever we were at the height of the pandemic, and these dollars are flowing from the feds, I'm talking your most conservative House and Senate congressional and Senate members are voting yes, and Trump's signing it. And we're getting relief as quickly as we can to people who have lost their income, to elderly and seniors who have no access to food. And we're, trying to get relief to our home health care providers and PPE and our essential workers and our municipalities. And we passed some pretty flawed bills. These are not perfect bills. Look at the fraud and the things that are happening at the federal level. Everyone's voting yes. Every member in the House, every member in the Senate at the federal level and at the state level. Well, I don't know about the federal level, but at the state level. And those were not perfect bills. So I'm getting hit on that because we can't prohibit, in being outnumbered 2-1 and as a House member, some of those dollars going to non-citizens. We can't stop it.
Because you're not the ones writing the bills.
We're not the ones writing the bill.
Right.
But when I'm governor, then I get to have line item veto power.
Right.
And I get general counsel and I get policy advisors, and I have weeks to decide whether to sign or veto a bill. As a House representative, I'm outnumbered 2-1 and I have to vote for the greater good. Okay. Now, I did that multiple times, but this is getting ridiculous. And in this particular time, what conservative Republican votes against a tax rebate? Because we want people to keep more of their money in the first place. But what we have happening at the federal level and has to come to an end is we're printing money and we're just passing it out. And look at the billions of dollars just from the Small Business Association funds, from the the Payroll Protection Act, from and the unemployment, the billions of dollars that have gone missing through cyber hijacking and the fraud at the federal and state level. Let's just let people keep their money in the first place. That's what I believe. But I'm not running the ship. It's why I'm running for governor. Mm-hmm. So instead, I get to vote on the producers are the ones that are hurting the most and why the cost of goods are going up. Inflation is being caused by bad policies, and this rebate is another Band-Aid on a bleed. It's just another Band-Aid on a bleed. At some point, we have to say no. And calling it a rebate is not accurate because some people have no liability. And the farmers and the extraction folk, the people who are producing energy in my district around this state that are driving vehicles and trying to make high-quality, affordable food accessible to every New Mexico citizen, they're seeing a $500 impact the first hour they're in the field, the first hour they're out working. And so it's just causing more inflation and leading us towards recession. And then, we tried to make the amendment to take out every single person can file a tax refund if they are in the United States legally. And that means even non-citizens who are here on work visas, who have not nationalized but are participating and have a Social Security number and tax ID. This was clearly redistribution of wealth, and it solves no problem but creates a bigger problem. And I believe it was just getting dollars out to get election to buy votes for this governor. So there's a point where we have to stop.
Yeah, and just to be clear,
the pandemic's over.
By calling it a rebate, I'm not trying to frame it as a positive or a negative. It's very difficult to come up with adequate. They are checks that are being sent out, and
indiscriminately to everyone,
right?
Regardless of the impact of inflation to the cost of goods sold, what it costs to their industry to produce it, and to the consumer.
So what would you do about taxes and tax reform?
So I believe that we need a comprehensive tax reform package. If we're going to move away from the GRT, the gross receipt tax, which is one of our biggest barriers, paired with the way that we tax manufacturing, which prohibits us from being a manufacturing state, then we have got to look at all the exemptions, and we have to look at bringing in a sales tax that's a lower rate. And, it's been a couple of years since we've tackled this, and there was bipartisan support for this reform. But if we, someone is a winner and a loser in all of this. So somebody who had a really good lobbyist went up there and got an exemption for their industry. And so we have to come back and say, everyone is going to contribute their fair share. And by doing so, we can have a 3.5% sales tax statewide. And there are studies that show that, that even with a small tax on food, the average consumer will pay less when we have a flat sales tax at 3.5% versus these cities and counties that are now at 8, 9, 10, some 11%, and that it makes it a fair, taxable regulatory environment so that businesses can grow, they can have a predictable and reliable tax code, and that it doesn't matter if they work in 1 county, 2 counties, 5 counties, all 33 counties, that they can have an ease of dealing with tax and revenue because we've made it easy to do business in New Mexico, and it's actually easier on the average taxpayer.
All right, thank you. And talk about education, school choice. There was a very interesting report that came out from the LFC about Albuquerque public schools. I think it, by and large, applies to all the schools in the state. But you've been a leader on school choice, so talk about your vision of education.
So my children grew up in New Mexico, and they completed their secondary education in homeschool, private school, public school, and dual enrollment. And in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, when there was no path forward and educational opportunities for children, I rallied the community to create those options. So first with a K-12 accredited Christian school, and not everybody can afford that, so homeschool co-op. Those gaps for children that are at public school that needed additional supports, we started after-school programs. And I became part of a higher ed task force that worked to bring in Western New Mexico University with a learning center so that we could bring in dual enrollment. And in small communities, most universities require 10 students in a class in order to hold a college class in a rural community. And so we made that work by partnering with public school students, homeschool, private school, and adult learners. And if we can do that in Truth or Consequences, we can bring that statewide. But what's happening right now is the people in power, primarily MLG and the unelected bureaucrats, think that they know better than our elected school board members, than our parents, than the educators that understand and know the local community needs and the capacity to implement programs that will produce student outcome. So I'm a huge champion of school choice because I believe every child, even those with disabilities, should have no closed door, and that parents should be parents of the primary educator and educators co-parent or co-educating with parents to make sure that every child progresses to the next grade on time, that they're reaching their full potential, and that they graduate with a post-high school goal in mind. And every community has a different path to get there, using evidence-based models, giving them transparency and accountability so that they can tell us how they're going to spend money and what the inputs are going to be, so that they can show us that teachers are improving and that student outcomes are improving. And we've got to get big government out of the way and get back to local decision-making and dollars following students. And that includes private, homeschool, charter, whatever it takes for students to reach their full potential.
All right. Well, we're going to shift gears slightly and take on an issue that deals with more national things in scope. Obviously, it's important to New Mexico, and I'm talking about the border and your commercial and your pledge to send the National Guard to the border, and just talk about border issues as you see them in New Mexico, and what the state can do, the governor can do.
So I guess if you know about the commercial, then you know that my commercial has real sheriffs who have endorsed me. I've 4 of the 5 border sheriffs have endorsed me. I represent Hidalgo County, which is a border county, and each of my counties are within the vicinity of the border, and they are considered border counties, and they receive what's called Stone Garden funding from the federal government to help them increase their presence as a deterrent. They don't. Just to help out the law enforcement, because they're bearing a lot of the burden right now. And so I have a lot of friends who are border agents, and we stay in contact, and I want to implement what the border agents want. And so they have a plan, a 20-year plan, and it includes a wall. And that wall is a deterrent. It gives them time to respond to incidents and to prioritize which occurrences they're responding to. Equally important to them is cybersecurity and technology that allows them to see these incidents in real time. So right now, they're blind to what's occurring until something is called, something's reported, or there's an incident. And it's usually by the landowners, the farmers and ranchers, many of whom are also supporting me in the primary, that they call and report. So what we have is we're part of the El Paso Border Patrol district. And so the people who are seeking asylum and refugee typically are coming across in Arizona and in Texas. What we have in New Mexico are the gotaways. My friends send me pictures of their game cams, and it's and it is people in full camo. They have on carpet shoes. They're coming across with backpacks loaded with fentanyl and drugs, or they're coming across with the most criminal human trafficking elements. When the Office of Medical Investigators call me and say, hey, we just pulled out a dead body out of the boot hill, it's typically women and children. So what we have is the criminal element, the gotaways coming across the New Mexico border. The border agents want the National Guard deployed, and I fully support that, because these are trained law enforcement officers dealing with the technical issues of border security. That's national security. And they're reporting that 60 to 80% of their time is being taken with comfort and care of people who they are processing who are crossing illegally. And so they want to do their job of law enforcement, and the National Guard will be able to come in and alleviate that. There are times when the county of Luna has had more illegal immigrants than their entire county population in one single month. And if Title 42 goes away, they're estimating 500,000 illegal immigrants crossing into the states a month. That is a problem. And what we're seeing now is fentanyl and the deaths related to fentanyl exceeding the number of COVID deaths. I think everybody in the state, their families, their communities are impacted by fentanyl. We have got to stop human trafficking and the drug trafficking that's coming across. So not only do we need to redeploy the National Guard, finish the wall, put in the cybersecurity, the cyber fiber optics and technology that they're asking for, but we need to celebrate and embrace every resource that the FBI will give us, ICE will give us, anti-terrorism, the HIDA resources, Stone Garden, all of the above. And if that's not enough, then we need to put state resources to the border.
So as a fiscal conservative, I do have to ask, I know that you can make an argument on both sides of the fence on the costs and benefits of illegal immigration, or mostly the cost. But what would the cost of the wall be to the state of New Mexico?
So I've been to the wall.
Your understatement.
I've been to the wall. And a lot of the contractors that were building the wall, even in Arizona and Texas, are New Mexico contractors. They're being paid to be on standby. The materials, you wouldn't believe the stacks of materials out there. So every day it's costing us that we don't finish the wall. And those materials have been bought and paid for. And the contractors, they have contracts that are being fulfilled, even though the work's not being done.
Federal government, though.
Federal government is doing that, yes. And so, when I'm governor, then I'm going to govern well, and we're going to work to get a new president. And so it may be that we address the fiber optics and the technology and redeploying the National Guard. And it may be a couple years before we're able to finish the wall, but I will be advocating for that.
Okay, that's fair. I don't know what the land ownership. I've tried to find some information about who owns the land along the border in New Mexico, and
it's mostly private in New Mexico,
Okay.
And I know that because those ranchers are supporting me in the primary. But there's a 60-foot Roosevelt barrier, and so even the federal government has already said, if you want to raise the private funds and you want to finish this wall, go right ahead. But there's a 60-foot distance between the border and those where the landowners can start the wall, resume the construction.
All right. Another issue that's top of mind with a lot of folks that also comes under the federal state jurisdiction is lands. And of course, we've got a lot of fires going on right now in New Mexico.
And preventable. Heartbreaking and preventable.
Yeah. And I realize that the federal government owns, upwards of 40% of the state of New Mexico's territory. The lands, the fire that had the initial start in Las Vegas or outside of Las Vegas was started by people under the Forest Service trying to control burn on a way too windy day. And,
in the middle of a drought.
Controlled. Yeah. So what can we do? What can you do, I should say, as governor about these situations?
Well, a lot of people talk about my strengths as being a job creator and a business owner and having legislative experience, starting, being a school champion and starting different types of schools for my community. This is another area where I have experience and knowledge far, far above any of my opponents. The Gila is in my district. The number one industry in my district is farming and ranching. Land and vegetation management, watershed improvement, forest thinning is something that I am intimately familiar with. And if I had been the governor, there is nothing more important in the state than water. We cannot control the drought. Elephant Butte and Cavallo Lake, two of the state's there's 6 large lakes, and 2 of those are in my district. And so water is life. We are at a critical mass on water management. And I believe that this governor has mismanaged our water. And part of managing and controlling water is land and vegetation management and forest thinning. So we talk about the federal government coming in and wanted to reduce grazing in our forests. They don't want cattle there because it interrupts we're going to replace oil and gas and farming and ranching with tourism. So we don't want a cow on the trail when someone's hiking. And so it's like not mowing your lawn. So if it's dry, there's no rain, and you never mow your lawn, and then you've got dry and dead and diseased wood around it, then a lightning strike leads to a catastrophic fire. But cattle grazing is like mowing your lawn, and removing small growth, non-native species like juniper that have overgrown in our forests, taking away the dead and diseased trees prevents catastrophic fire. Forest thinning is good. Commercial logging is good when it's done in a proper way. And I think we see examples of that on many of our native lands. Taos, I think, in Taos Ski Valley is a perfect example. And when the big forest fire happened, that was in my district in the Gila, it stopped when it hit tribal land where they were doing their own land management and they were able to care for, and where the land managers and owners were the true conservationists. So when we remove non-necessary vegetation, talking salt cedar, juniper, any of the other non-native species that are along our rivers, then we are improving our watershed, and we're seeing more flow of water and improving our forests, our healthy forests, and our lands.
So you're advocating for more active management at the state level. obviously, federal government owns a lot of it, and I realize there is a parallel here between this and the border, that your ability to work with this administration is somewhat limited. But
there's much more we can do on federal land. Like
Okay.
they're surveying land, and they're doing, the environmental surveys. There has to be an archaeological survey. And the area that they try to focus on the most is called the WUI. It's where the wilderness and the urban interface. And so where houses meet the wilderness and the forests. And just in the Gila, so we're just talking about my district of Grant, Hidalgo, and Sierra, there are 147,000 sections, not acres, of land that's ready to be thinned and approved by the federal government for thinning. The dollars that come from the federal government are very limited. But if I had $28 billion in COVID money, and you talk about infrastructure, I would have been looking at water infrastructure. And to me, that's improving the watershed, looking at the quality of our drinking water and our wastewater systems throughout all of our state that are most of them 40 years old. And when the governor says, oh, this is a moonshot, I've got all kinds of COVID money. Tell me, cities and counties and municipalities, what's your dream? What can I do to help you with infrastructure? It was wastewater, it's drinking water. It's that sort of infrastructure that's aging. And so we've got it. This is an urgent, immediate need. And when you look at these fires across the state, I believe, had I been governor during COVID and I had those dollars to work with, we'd be seeing less fires right now.
Now, when Yvette Harrell was a member of the legislature like yourself, she and we worked together with a coalition, a diverse coalition, I might add, of people trying to push back against the way the federal government manages their lands, and even at some future date try to take some of those lands maybe back that the federal government runs and doesn't always do a very good job of. Is that something that would be a part of that? Okay.
I mean, this governor is going in the opposite direction. Biden wants to push this narrative. It's called 30 by 30.
Right.
30% of the land is owned by the government by the year 2030. We're already past that in the state of New Mexico. So this governor made an executive order basically for 50 by 30. She wants half the state to be owned by the government. And in the House bill, this last year in the House bill, they started off with $20-some million that taxpayers would purchase private land and put it into conservation or government use. That is not good, and it's going the opposite direction. We're already unique as a Western state in that we have a lot of state and federal land. That takes away our ability to have the ability to develop industry, the ability to have any sort of property tax to generate for our schools and local communities. It ties our hands a lot, and it's the opposite direction.
Yeah, I know the federal government's upwards of 40%. I don't know what percentage the state itself owns, but I've got to think that's getting close to 50% as well.
No, not under my watch.
Okay.
No.
Right.
The state government will not be using your tax dollars to purchase private property and take it out of production, whether it's food production, oil and gas production, whether it's extraction industry. We're not going to do that. No.
All right. Thank you.
And I mean, what's happening in my district alone is just, it's a war on these industries. And there's such a disconnect between the producer and the consumer. Everybody wants high quality, affordable food. Then you got to talk about how that happens. 6% of the United States is producing food for all of us. And we've got to protect and celebrate that industry. And they are managing the land well. Their livelihoods depend on it. These are proud third and fourth generation farmers and ranchers, and they need to be acknowledged for the heroes they are. It's the same for the oil and gas industry, for the mining industry. A second largest copper mine is in my district. And Chairman McQueen, who chairs the Energy Committee, is anti-mining. And so I have to go up there and fight in a very difficult climate to keep the copper mine open in my district. But how do you have their alternative energy agenda without mining? But we're not mining in New Mexico. We haven't permitted a new mine since the 90s.
Yeah. No, I totally hear you, especially copper. It is so integral to all those renewable technologies that they seem to think are the future.
And to every person who wants hot water in their home.
Yeah.
And to every person, copper is in everything.
Right.
It's everywhere, every part of our everyday lives, as is petroleum and petroleum products.
Yep. We've got just a few more minutes to go, but I want to ask a big picture political question. The Morning Consult poll has Michelle Lujan Grisham at 48% approval, 45% disapproval. It is one of the lower levels in the entire country, but she does have her her head above water, just barely there.
I'm just wondering if this poll was done before she announced she was getting married in Washington, D.C., and that Kamala Harris was going to be officiating. Kamala, who has had no time to visit the border, has found time to do the wedding for our governor.
That's an excellent question, and I wonder a lot of things about these polls. But assuming that this is accurate, and you are the nominee to take her on, why are you the best candidate to take her on?
Yeah, well, I'm the best candidate to take her on because I'm ready to govern on day one. This is a monumental election, not only for our state, it's hard for me. I don't know how to describe what we're living other than upside down world, but also for our 245-year republic and what it means to have individual state rights and a governor having the right to say, no, I will not delegate duties to the federal government, take back control of the family's ability to self-govern and to make decisions for their children and to let parents be in charge, not bureaucrats. Like as a mother, as a community advocate, as a job creator, and as a legislator, it is imperative to me that we have a rapid course correction and that we have a foundation of conservative values that will set this state free from the big government that has kept us in poverty when we should be one of the wealthiest states in the nation, but also for the American dream. And so I know how hard I work, and that is why I win big in a 34% Republican district. I've won by 57% this last time with a Libertarian and being outspent. It's why Brian Egoff decided to redistrict me out of my district and take the representative voice away from my people. And it's why I know I can beat Michelle in November. I knocked 2,000 doors during COVID. If she tries to debate me and say that she saved lives, I'll tell her personal stories that are contrary to that. Our children, homicide rate has doubled, suicide rate, self-harm, medication, social isolation, learning loss among the highest in the nation. This is not a moonshot. We need courageous leadership and someone who's ready to fight. I got in this race fully knowing what it's like to be in the minority and what it's like to run a nasty campaign in New Mexico in a targeted seat. I'm still at the table. It's easy to throw shots at the person who's in the arena. My opponents have no record. I have an A rating from NRA, A rating from the Small Business Association, NFIB, 100% rating, now a lifetime endorsement of the national right to life. Conservation voters of New Mexico call me enemy number one, but my opponents call me a liberal. I'm going to beat MLG in November. I just need support getting through the primary.
And how do people find out more about your campaign and yourself?
Yeah, so I've got a website, RebeccaForNM.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can just type in Rebecca Dow. It'll pop up. And my cell phone number is 575-571-1056. And I love talking to constituents and hearing their solutions. The governor is the most powerful person in the state. Their job is to give the power back to the people. So I may be a name on the ballot, but this is our race to save our state and to save the American dream.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca Dow. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube and Rumble channels. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or have Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.